Okay, let's talk about my thoughts about the league. It's been out for about 6 days. This is my second hardcore character. My first one was level 94 and died on my Maven attempt. Now, the big juicy part of the league is the updated breach mechanic, but I want to jump straight to sort of the meat of this video. By the way, if you want to watch the run back, I'll be live right now. There will be a pinned comment down below. I'll be live right as of the posting of this video, and I'll be running back my attempts against the bosses that I died to. I'm the furthest I've ever been in hardcore, basically at 2 stones. I'm going for 3 and 4 stones. But that being aside, let's talk about the Genesis tree. And the Genesis tree is, I think, the real juicy part about this league. Effectively, how the Genesis tree actually works is you can sort of select what you want. Like, I want a weapon, I want 2 hands, I want to have random quality, so that way I can maybe have more than 20% quality. I want to have, you know, more chance for physical modifiers, because obviously I want physical damage on an axe. I want more chance for speed, so I can get attack speed. And you can do this with like anything. There's like quivers, jewels, you can do it with one-handed melee, ranged weapons, helmets, body armor, etc. The end result of this tree ends up being, it is very easy to get pretty solid mid-game gear. If you're trying to craft like, you know, mirror tier gear or get like perfect tier 1 affixes on literally everything, you're still going to have to like use recombinators or other crafting sources. But in order to get basically gear that's going to last you all the way up until like, you know, pretty late into the game, it is almost completely free. And I want to show you an example of this, because if you go and look here, like in my trade system here, there's all kinds of gear that back in the day, this gear would have sold like absolute crazy. Look at like this axe right here, level 57 axe, good for the campaign. But look at this one here, okay? 732 with attack speed. I've got axes like this coming out my ass. Here is a maul, if there was anyone that ever used a maul. No one does in PoE 1, but here you go. Perfectly fractured, tier 1 physical on a maul. That's just for weapons. If we go and look at like, you know, gloves, etc., like the boots and gloves you can have, you have tons and tons and tons of resistances, like very easy. There's double res with 35% movement speed, like no one cares about that at all. You can make almost anything you want basically for free, including 6 links and 5 links. Like, you can make multiple 5 links in just 1 click. And all of this gear here, I didn't buy any of this except the coil, because uniques are kind of the harder thing to actually acquire now in order to target certain uniques. But all of this gear, I basically just clicked 1 time on the tree and printed out like a 6 link with res and armor, or the gloves, life, res, you know, movement speed, chaos res, this axe I made from the tree. It's almost like an SSF league for literally everybody, because of how easy it is on the tree due to the addition of provisioning wound grafts. And provisioning wound grafts, if you don't know what they are basically these currencies you get from doing the league mechanic that you put into the tree, and it makes an item based upon how you've set up the tree. And because you can refund the tree at any point for no cost, you can make gloves, and you can make like 3 or 4 gloves at once. They're all like probably pretty good. Then you can go and you can make boots, and then you make a helmet. So you can, like I'm saying, make gear exceptionally easy. Here's another like ring. I just need a life on a chaos ring. Here, look at this ring. This was 1 click. Here you go. You know, res ring with life. Like I'm saying, this gear is not hard to make at all just by clicking. And because of that, the value of gear that is life and res and like basic stats, I'm not talking, like I said, the perfect gear stuff is more, you're going to recombinate and use all these other crafting materials, but the basic and entry level gear is easy for everybody to create and has almost no value in trade because of how easy it is actually to create it. So that is both a positive and a negative in my mind. The positive is it's much easier to access for like the average player going into the game, particularly if you want to try hardcore 2. You can shit out some gear pretty easily and just play the game without having to interact with trade or having to worry about like getting inflated out of the economy and all this stuff. You can just like make gear and just play the game, and you don't really need much knowledge because the tree in and of itself is basically exceptionally easy to understand. Like, you less chance for intelligent requirements. That means you're not going to get as much mage shit. More chance for strength shit. More chance for things that have strength requirements. So you're going to get more mauls, for example, okay? This one is more chance for physical, more chance for physical. Everyone can understand these concepts. These are like pretty basic. So the level of knowledge you actually need to be able to put together a tree in order to get at least somewhat close to what you want is actually fairly low. So therefore, it's a fairly accessible league for the majority of the people, at least from what I can tell, in my opinion, You're welcome to disagree all you want, but that's what seems to be like for me. And you can get access to this stuff fairly early. It's also very easy to level alternate accounts for this reason too, because you can actually have the full tree setup that you get through unlocking through doing the mechanic, and we'll talk about the mechanic in just a moment. And then because of that, you can actually get gear that you would not expect to be able to have very early and very easy for alternate characters that you create. I think a good example of this would be like this axe. This is a level 36 axe, but it's 24% quality on a 5-link, 210 to 345, and that's a crazy axe for an early game. I'd be in like Act 3 or something by then, and absolutely smashing with an axe that's like hilarious for that level. This would be an axe that, in previous leagues, maybe I get to red maps with this max for axe, for example, or like this one I showed earlier, level 52, and this thing does 732. This is better than most axe I've had in any of the previous leagues. So you can get some very wild gear for alternate characters, and for that reason, it's also very easy, and particularly in SSF this league, to be able to make multiple characters. So acquisition of gear is one of the most notable points for me this league. Now, the other part here is going to be these grafts, and these grafts are going to do a variety of abilities. They seem fairly impactful, like early on when you're going through the campaign, and then later on in the in the in-game, I'm mostly finding myself using these for the affixes that they would have associated with them. So the grafts not only have an ability, for instance, this one is a blocking ability, in which it's going to give me basically a molten shell when I receive damage that's going to block damage for me. It blocks up to 4,500 damage, which is actually an absolute shitload of being able to block damage for just one ability, and that procs like in and of itself just from if my HP goes below 100% basically. So this is very nice to have. But I do find myself using these more for the secondary effects, which you're going to notice: increased chance of provisioning wound gifts, area of effect, armor, or like this one here is going to give me a 54% attack damage and 14% area damage. That's 69 nice, or 68, I should say, bad math there, bonus damage towards my Sunder, for instance. So these are like crazy stats, and increased Graft Blood gain. And Graft Blood you get from doing the current mechanic, and you use that to actually craft shit from the tree. So you can add in some pretty good secondaries. There's movement speed, there's armor, there's even life. Like I've seen them with like 7% HP max life that you can get on these as well. So you can stack even more life. So you can get life pretty high this league as well, not only from the grafts, but because of the new jewel also. So these grafts have been pretty cool, more impactful early from the active skill portion, and then less impactful later on in the game from the active portion, and more so I'm finding myself using them for the stat secondaries. Maybe there's a better combination. I haven't really focused on trying to make the active skills actually do something enough that I actually care about yet, so there's probably someone out there doing a better job at figuring out that for the moment. But that's just been my experience with these grafts so far. Now, for the actual league mechanic, there are, as far as I can tell, 3 different variants of this. There's the normal breach, which is just like mob spawn. You kill the mobs, and at the end, you're going to get some of the blood that you use on the tree in order to craft equipment, as well as you have a chance of getting some of the womb gifts, which you actually need to be able to put in to craft the gear to begin with. Okay, and by the way, womb gifts have levels associated with them, and so because of that, you can kind of craft the level gear you want. Maybe you want something for a low level character. Maybe you're trying to just make level 83 is the highest level womb gifts in order to get, the best gear possible, for instance. But this is basically the normal breach, and this isn't really that much changed. You're filling up this bar before the bar. It's kind of like a timer. You're racing against time to make sure you have the bar all the way filled up, so that way at the end of this, you actually have it stabilized instead of collapse. If you fail, it collapses and just ends it, and then you go back and you kill whatever mobs happen to summon in the middle. Sometimes they summon the boss, and then the breach collapses after that, and you're going to get your gifts. Then you have the fortress ones, and the fortress ones are basically bigger versions of the primary mechanic. Now, this is the primary mechanic. You're going to have these walls. You get this as early on as like the second zone in the campaign. You start having these actually appear throughout the campaign. You're going to burn through the walls and get to the middle. Now, the more walls you remove, and on this mini map up here, there's these dots. The more dots that you walk over activate more spawn points and make it easier for the mobs to actually reach the middle. So that way, when you activate the middle, what happens? They all go and try to kill her. So you can sort of make it as easy or as difficult as you want, judging by how many walls you remove, as well as how many of the spawn points you actually activate. So if you want more mobs, you can do that. Less mobs, you can just kind of rush to the middle and try to leave as many walls up as possible. Then you're going to summon her. And what happens after you summon her? you're going to have to play a bit of a defense game here. So it almost reminds me of a mixture of Blight and Breach, because they have this HP bar at the bottom, and you have to keep her alive throughout the waves. There's 6 waves in this one. And yes, there's shields you can grant her. There's little power-ups that show up that you're going to click on, just like it's like building towers in Blight. And then at the end of it, you're going to get your rewards if you manage to keep her alive the whole time. Now, the Fortress one I mentioned is basically this same thing, but inside its own zone, and it has 24 waves instead, and it's longer, and they have chests that can give some of the Foulborn uniques, which are basically uniques with their special mods that you can get from the Foulborn mechanic, and they also give you a lot more of the Graft blood. Now, the amount of Graft blood you can have is based upon the hands that you're holding. Like, I can hold like 9,000 or something like that. But you see that one's over. 322 Graft blood achieved. I get a provisioning womb gift. And then that's the end of basically that mechanic. So that's the second one. And then the Fortress version is the third one. Now, the mechanic itself has mixed reviews. It's pretty simple to understand. You go in the middle. You stop her from getting killed. Everyone can kind of understand that. Again, the knowledge requirement of this league is like fairly low. There is a time element in which you're sitting there waiting, particularly in the Fortress for 24 waves. You are kind of waiting for the mobs just to swarm in order to kill her. And it can really take some time. You do get pretty decent experience because there's a lot of mobs, but if you're really a juicer and you got, you're stacking all the mechanics later on the game, you're probably getting better experience literally elsewhere anyway. So for me, this mechanic, I actually quite like it. I think it's a fine mechanic. I don't think it's particularly like the funnest one. Like, I think Blight's more fun. Harvest is probably more fun. I know that's a more controversial one, but there's a lot other mechanics that I prefer. There's just a lot of kind of visual clutter on this one. That the walls are kind of, everywhere in this. And there's a lot of like kind of mini work. You gotta go activate the things and then bring down the walls. You gotta wait for all 24 waves. So that part just kind of, just takes a while for me. So in terms of the actual mechanic for me, it's all right. I give it like a 6 out of 10 or something in terms of like enjoyability of doing the actual mechanic. And you're mostly just doing the mechanic anyway, so that way you'll get the blood, and then you go back to the tree. And once you're back in the tree, you're going to click on the tree, and you're just going to create, whatever it is you happen to be trying to farm at the moment. I think I'm making axes at the moment. I forget. But there you go. I made some axes or something like that. That one actually would have been all right if it didn't get fire there on it. And there you go. There's some axes I created. Some accuracy, blah, 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 5 links, and he just kind of shits out a bunch of like gear that's probably pretty decent. Bummer about the fracture on that one. And then, there you go. That's kind of the whole mechanic basically wrapped up. So in other words, really easy to get gear, really easy to understand. Definitely this league, a massive devaluation in things of just like life res basic stats. You still have to use like other methods if you're really trying to make like the best gear at the end. I mean, even if you want spells, like it's harder to get spell suppression in this one too, for instance. So like this is only good from the early and mid-game stages of like getting your character strong. But in SSF, it would be very strong. It's very strong in the early and the mid-game, and it does bring down the economics of like just basic life and res and early game gear almost have 0 value. So it's good for newer players, or people that have trouble like myself understanding all of the different crafting mechanics. You can just go to the tree and you can just shit out some decent gear. Doesn't really, I think, impact too much like the Giga hiring gear outside of getting good pieces to them recombinate. I'm sure you could do that, but you're still going to do like meta mods, etc. So I think it's nicely positioned in the early to mid game. I do have the feeling that this mechanic in its entirety probably wouldn't go core. I would assume not, just because of how much, in my opinion, it does trivialize the whole gear progression system up into the mid game. I actually don't know why I would do anything to make gear until like level 90, plus. I don't know why I would gauge with other mechanics except this one to make my first like mid-game set of gear. I got 2 Void Stones in hardcore just with gear I crafted basically myself. I didn't really end up buying anything because of I can just make it myself for free easily. And if I tried to sell the extras I make, no one's buying it anyway. I will say that did shift the value of things I'm noticing to like uniques that are harder to get, like Rothless Coil. This is expensive. I had to pay 9 divine for this unique belt, for instance, or jewels. There is a jewel like I was talking about earlier that gives you a ton of HP. It gave my previous character that died like 600 HP just from the one jewel, and it's shifting value to the harder to acquire things that you cannot get, for instance, from the tree in and of itself. Now, the Foulborn uniques are interesting. There is a lot of them with a lot of different versions of these secondary stats that you can have that show up here. And, like the pink line there is one that removes one of the stats and puts on their Foulborn version. These are like predetermined. These aren't just like complete RNG out of the pool of literally anything. These are actually handcrafted by GGG themselves, and only certain uniques actually have these, for instance. Now, this is like most uniques in the game, almost all of these on the market for me right now are completely worthless. Like, no one will buy basically any of these. All of the ones I've acquired so far, and I've got a lot of them, have sold for nothing outside of that one jewel. However, I think this is a very simple situation of it adds a lot of different variety in the game, particularly around builds at the moment. People have to figure out which of these are actually busted. Some people will make some builds with these. I'm sure there's going to be some that open up new combinations, new possibilities. And there's 3 rings now because you can do the new ascendancies. And so because of the 3-ring thing, I'm sure the combinations will be wild and more open. And once somebody figures out and posted some build guide videos, and some of these unique items are going to go through the roof. But what those actual builds are, I don't know yet. Overall, I'm pretty positive about the league. It's pretty fun. I will be surprised if the tree goes core in its current state and iteration, because I feel like it's just very, very strong for early to mid-game gear. So I was a bit surprised once I kind of figured it out and got my skill points in the tree. That's like, oh, I can just, shit out very easy gear. Basically, it doesn't take anything to get your character, geared back up if you lose him or something like that. So very much like that. It is definitely a league in which it's fun to make new characters, because you can blast through the league very easily with some gear that's absolutely wild. Normally you wouldn't have people like spending a lot of currency to craft gear for new characters at this point, but you don't really have to spend a lot of currency to craft gear, because the Genesis tree costs less of the blood material to craft the lower level stuff, but you still have all the skill points in the tree. So you can make low level gear that's absolutely insane for its level, and tons of it for very low cost if you've had a character higher level. So for that reason, it's very easy. And again, particularly if you play SSF, to make all additional builds throughout the game, which I think is quite fun as well. It might add some longevity through your playthrough. But this does seem like the time in which it's the easiest time to get gear with the least amount of investment, and you can become, decently strong and tanky without really needing to know much of almost anything, which again is good to newer players and probably, a little too strong, as it just trivializes, in my opinion, a lot of the other mechanics and devalues tons of stats like Chaos Res, just as an example for one. It's like you can just like click it and get it. So it does seem like it's just 3D print your own gear out with almost exactly what you want, which to me seems kind of crazy. It's one of the first leagues I've been part of where I was just like very surprised at how strong the league mechanic actually is. So that's just sort of my take on it. I doubt it goes all the way core into the game exactly as it stands for the reasons I've already mentioned. Overall, I'm very positive, and I'm having like a fun time at it with the comments that I've already mentioned. That's about it. Come on by live if you want to watch me die again. I got to run back against the boss, and I said if I do not make it all the way to Maven, and I die before I beating Maven, which would be the first time beating Maven on hardcore for me, then I have to make my first minion build, which will be, I'm sure, funny for Ghazi to watch. Anyway, that's about it. Love you. See you on the live.